step into the future where the beats don't stop, with a not centralized show ready to drop. Talking AI, blockchain, the tech that's hot.
Hey folks, so we're back, and this week we're talking a little bit about AI as well as blockchain. We'll start with the latter first because, as some of you may know, we did a lot of work with the CBDC pilot back in early 2023. We did the construction project, and that was where we had digital escrows as well as zero knowledge proofs as part of it, so you could obfuscate the transaction amount from anyone that was not a counterparty to the trade, so it retains that commercial confidentiality. But I guess the big thing that we've been seeing over the last couple of months, and in terms of the work that you've been doing, has been on this need that you don't need a CBDC to actually get these things done. And so we wrote an article called Central Bank Driven Blockchain Economies Without CBDCs. What was that about?
That article was a thought process to try to understand what the role of blockchain, and more specifically tokens, is within the wider economy. And it also highlights, I believe, the lack of understanding that the overall community has in terms of what the actual added value is of a blockchain, and conflates the use of blockchain with tokens, where tokens are effectively very poorly defined objects that are almost incorrectly equated with blockchain overall, right? And I think that we see that very much with the CBDC, where, first of all, like most things blockchain, many of them don't exist. CBDCs don't exist yet. CBDCs are a wider concept that equates to a promise by a central bank, and that promise is reflected as an object on a blockchain. Now, because this object is money, it needs to be fungible. Therefore, we almost always think of a CBDC as an ERC20 representation of money that is a promise by the central bank. But that's not the only way in which we can actually leverage off the beauties of blockchain while still being backed by a central bank. Because we have one option, which is a token, or an ERC20 token, that is the representation of money that lives on a public blockchain. Another example is that we have some form of smart contract that represents the value transfer within a blockchain that is actually hosted by the central bank. Both of them offer certain similarities in terms of upside, because you can still gain composability, although composability to a lower extent, because it's not a public blockchain, if you will, right? But you can still achieve atomic settlement. You can still achieve the transparency in terms of the events occurring, so that you have traceability of financial activity, not necessarily traceability of funds like you'd have in a transparent ERC20. But what we're really discussing here is that you don't need to go down a very complicated legal route in terms of changing M0 by creating a token that is the representation of the central bank promise, but you can just offer a technological settlement layer that sits side by side. For example, the MPP that offers the similar types of benefits to a blockchain without going down the complexity of changing monetary policy and so forth.
Yeah, creating new money, so to speak. The benefits that come from, I guess, the way that the central bank and any economy could get from having their settlement layer on blockchain. So not just the transparency, because what we see a lot of in this space is that, well, why should we have blockchain? We can already settle things really fast. We've got MPP, we've got this way of payments in Australia that Australia's actually in many ways not ahead in other areas in, say, tech, but in terms of payments, we're definitely one of the world leaders. But even with that, it's not programmable. There's that lack of immutability and transparency because it's not on a blockchain. So speed is not the only thing there. And to your point, that there are some benefits. So what do you have to say to things like, so some people have thought that, and we were probably saying this as well, that, okay, the CBDC thing, that pilot project, that was interesting. We can take it further just on a stable coin, but we don't have yet, or it's still early stages for the Aussie dollar kind of stable coins. But I guess the thinking now is that, yes, stable coins will be useful, but we don't necessarily have to wait for them to take advantage of the benefits of blockchain as a settlement layer. What do you think about that?
Not at all. I think that there is, to my knowledge, no stablecoin that is widely adopted in another currency than US dollars. So it's not just an Australian
widely adopted. Yeah.
It's not an Australian phenomenon. It's an ex-USD phenomenon. And the question is why? Well, I think that as we do within the blockchain space, our focus is on the proliferation of blockchain, not in actually solving problems that people want to have solved per se, right? So if you look at the conversations with regards to stablecoins, there is almost more focus on why a stablecoin business model is so amazing, looking at USDC and USDT, versus what use case does it actually solve if it's not a US dollar stablecoin, right? I mean, in the US dollar scenario, we have two main utilities. One of them is for the degen community to park their cash, and we're parking that cash from, let's say, 100% vol to almost zero vol, or even 10% vol is nothing for crypto space. Meaning that why would you put money into anything else than the USDC or USDT stablecoin, which everybody knows, right? There's no real need for another currency in this scenario because the FX risk is just so low that for the degen community it's
negligible,
right? Negligible.
Yeah.
If you are, on the other hand, using a stablecoin as a means of settlement because you're in an economy where you don't trust the central bank, mm-hmm. or where rather inflation is so high, then you're obviously not going to be using a stable coin pegged to the promise of that central bank, right? You're going to be using a stable coin pegged to the promise of a stable central bank.
Yeah.
Therefore, you just use USDC, right? So then, in a case like another Western country that is not using the US dollar, like for example Australia, why do we want one? And we don't know yet because we're focused on the stablecoin itself and not on the utility per se of that stablecoin. Like for example, what we were showing in the CBDC pilot, what we were showing was how you can streamline construction payments through digital escrows and through atomic settlements, which used stablecoin as a basis, but it actually didn't need to have a stablecoin. It could have just been another methodology that was not built on ERC-20s that simply allowed for atomic settlements and digital escrows of tokenized cash, right?
Yeah.
So again, I think that the focus needs to be on the problem that is being solved as opposed to on the problem that you want to solve because you want to have a good business model.
Yeah, very important. And on that note, you can see below here our article on this topic, and you'll hear us talk more about this, especially as we're starting to get engaged in more real-world projects that are in this tokenization space. And it's, to your point, it's the essence, like what is the problem that's actually trying to be solved? It should be these things that are about moving from manual to digital, about creating efficiencies, or even unlocking the liquidity that may not be easily accessible in some of these places. So on that note, let's dive into some AI stuff.
Yeah, I actually just to add one more note to the process of tokenization and stablecoins. the way that we think of tokenization and stablecoins today is built on Web3 primitives. These Web3 primitives are actually very, very different to the commercial needs of most Web2 businesses today. Transparency and the way that we think of transparency in the Web3 space is not compatible with the way real world does business. ERC20s, in many cases, actually do not work because they allow parties outside of the, let's call it, commercial ecosystem to see everything that is happening within that commercial ecosystem. And you can argue as much as you want over the importance of transparency and so forth, but you cannot share your margins within the real world economy. There's no compliance department that will allow that. There's no compliance department that will allow sharing of confidential information, right? So if we want blockchain and stablecoins, or let's call it, if we want blockchain for value transfer, we need to start thinking in more confidential terms, using ZK proofs and effectively using other standards that are not the ones that we've been typically using, like, for example, ERC20s and ERC721s. Right? We will start to see as commerce adopts blockchain, other standards will start to be developed that are not transparent in the way that we know them, but are more transparent in terms of events occurring, where those events are only understood by the parties related to that transaction, right? So confidentiality is going to be an extremely important part of all of these standards that are coming up for the wider adoption of blockchain.
Well, it sounds like programmability and the best of the old world of TradFi in terms of commercial confidentiality. So very good. All right, folks, so back onto the AI side of things, and as you'll see here, we've got an article on one of the features in Psych, which we're calling nodules. Shout out to Nick for coming up with that name. It stands for knowledge module. You know, it's great to make up new names and stuff here. We blame the blockchain space for that, but the Hitchhiker's Guide to Nodules is really important because you start to rethink about how information is managed, about how, you know, you have all of these SharePoints or S drives or your Google Docs, and information is just all over the place, repeated. It is messy, it's not clean, but yet you can have AI do a lot of things and clean that up. But why don't you just tell people, like, how do you see nodules in this sense?
Well, nodules it's although it is a usable piece of infrastructure that we have developed, in reality it's more of a generalized concept that containerizes information. The importance of that is kind of the acknowledgement that information is extremely fragmented, incoherent, dirty, and it gets worse every single day just because of the amount of information that is created by people that shouldn't be creating information. So what we see is that let's just try to coin a term. Let's call it LLM native workflows, right? It's workflows that are built using LLMs from the ground up, right? And if you look at what those native LLM workflows will look like, they're going to be very different to the workflows that are similar in nature but without LLMs, simply because there's so much power in the way that the language models are able to process semantic information and to reason around this information, right? So we were talking before about contextual translation, right, as being something that is really powerful within, or it's a very powerful potential of workflows that are native to, or LLM native workflows. Now, here, as we build up these workflows, we need to effectively tag and set the right information in the right place. So, for example, if I'm going to create a contextual translator where I can write things in the way that I understand them, but then you read them in the way that you understand them, we need to have for example, a nodule that contains all of the information about me, right? It contains my LinkedIn information, my own notes that I want the LM to know about me so that it understands what I mean by the things that I type, right? Then that transforms my, let's call it, shitty piece of information into formal language with formal ideas that I can then verify. Does this make sense? Is this really what I mean? And if it's not, then at least it highlights the inconsistencies in my statements, right? Once that is transformed to formal, more correct information, then it can be translated into something that you would understand, right? So, for example, if you're not a developer, then LMs are really good at exchanging the concepts that are developer-centric in the idea that I have to something that is perhaps more marketing-specific, or whatever it is that is your skill set. So what I just described there was the use of nodules as containers for the information of my persona, of your persona, of the idea that I'm trying to convey. And the prompts effectively become the transformers of the information that is translated across this workflow, right?
It's interesting because, like, on that point of translators, there was a really interesting hackathon where the person that won, and this was meant to show the power of AI as a companion, the person that won was not a developer. She created something in Streamlit, which is a UI-friendly way of creating mini applications before you go to production level. But she's not a developer, she's a project manager, and she was able to use the AI to really explain well what it was that she wanted to do, and yes, had some technical skills to, do some stuff with it, but effectively not a developer. So she was able to translate well. I think that was the key thing that was there. It wasn't just that, yeah, AI is great. No, we're going to have this is a glimpse into the future where people, you're not a marketer, but you're being given these things which are translated from the marketing expert into a language that you understand so that you can do something about, the design of the application, how we go about and do campaigns. Like, there's going to be multiple pathways to have these different sorts of translations. So it's going to be really interesting because things that were barriers, like right now, that are barriers, should not be barriers anymore in the future.
Yeah. If you think of it, let's take it to an extreme. Alan Turing comes up with computers, yet, sure, under many, many circumstances, because of many circumstances, he does not become a millionaire. But Bill Gates becomes one of the richest men alive. Why? Well, because he actually translated the usage of computers into something that became more mainstream. The role of the translator within our society is so important because it's so difficult, right? The people that actually make things mainstream, and let's just use money as a benchmark for success, which, it's arguable, but nevertheless, it's an easy one to take. The people that actually make a lot of money are not the ones that come up with ideas necessarily, or they're the ones that take that idea and translate it to a form that is digestible and effectively adds value to a wide range of audiences, right? It's difficult. Incredibly so, the LMs are actually really good at doing those contextual translations, which effectively mean that they can take these concepts and make them user-friendly as a concept, it's magical, right?
Absolutely, and I think that's where the skill set of the humans comes in. The last episode we spoke about this need for humans in the loop, but I think this is where there's a real differentiating kind of factor, especially early on as we're starting to use LLMs and these native LLM workflows, as you mentioned, and using large language models as the translators for us, like the ones that will stand out. Yes, early adopters, but secondly, it's going to be those that have that skill, that are already thinking like this. Because if you gave this concept to someone that doesn't really know, yeah, sure, they can learn, but it's going to be those first ones that already kind of think like this that will come up with the new ideas for how they can use these, how they themselves as translators, as well as the machine as a translator, can just upend different kinds of workflows and create new forms of value, whether it's monetary or something else in terms of the measure. But we're trying to do some stuff here with Psych in terms of the different areas that we've got Where do you kind of see this going? What does a crystal ball kind of look like for you in an ideal kind of world, at least maybe for the next couple of months or so, because things move so fast?
Yeah. Look, you see Copilot. You see Salesforce also comes up with their own interpretation of a workflow that implements language models, right?
Yep.
And these are massive organizations with unlimited budgets. And the way that they're going about the let's call it the transition period from non-LM world to LM world is by injecting language models into day-to-day workflows. Now, as a business, we cannot compete with that. We shouldn't. Therefore, what we're trying to do is just rethink from the ground up, what do workflows between people look like if they're language model native, right? It does mean that we will propose different ways of doing things, but that's kind of the role of startup businesses, right? We need to create new ideas that are emerging. And to that end, what we see, and we saw that with Dreams, we see the use of language models within the organization of your ideation process together with others as a team, right? We see Psych playing a role as well in the organization and restructuring of data. And we're not talking about labeling existing data or adding permissions to existing data, which should actually already be in place. We're talking about taking existing data, the semantic content of that existing data, and cleaning it so that you end up with an actual data set, on the other hand, of that journey that is reasonable. And I think that the key word here is reasonable. For example, I could always say, you can say things like, the drop of water fell up. That's not a reasonable statement, right? And language models are actually quite good at identifying lack of reason within information. Now, the example that I took is very, very extreme, but if you look at information within documents of companies, you will see incoherent information in relation to other pieces of knowledge that the company has already accepted as true, right? Those inconsistencies are very dangerous, and language models will help us identify them. So through the set of prompts that we're creating and the workflow that cleans that information, we will end up with knowledge bases that will actually add value with a high degree of accuracy, unlike existing data sets, right? So we're looking at Dreams, right? So that's the ideation process. We're looking at context translation, which is making teams much more efficient. And we're looking at cleaning information or structuring information in coherent ways so that startups or new companies that come into the playing field effectively start up with let's call it a platform of intelligence that is much more powerful than the ones that we have today. I mean, we don't have any today, to be fair.
Yeah, well, we're going to create that, so watch this space. 1 sec. Make sure we didn't cut off. No, we're good, 5 minutes left. Let's repeat that. Yeah, so that's why it's important for people to watch this space, because that's what companies like us and we're seeing others are starting to create. But if you are interested in how to do this, like rethinking, whether it's about the blockchain stuff that we were talking about or the AI, then definitely come hit us up. We've got multiple events that we're at and talks that we're doing. So
yeah, it's funny. Sometimes we get the question, and it's, well, are you a blockchain, specialist, or are you an AI specialist? I think that we're both, but more importantly, we try to focus on the role that emerging tech has within that societal impact, right? May it be at a company level, at a team level, at a government level. If you're going to change the way things are done for the better, you want to do so with technologies that are different. Not just because you want to implement new technologies, but because they give you an edge that hasn't been used before, right? So blockchain plays an important role as a settlement layer, as a layer of communicating high integrity information and events, AI plays an incredibly important role in structuring all of this information from, an unstructured form to a structured form, and guide us on the human side, right? Both of these two types of workflows are necessary for almost any real-world application. So you can't neglect one without offering an incomplete solution, right? A complete solution needs to take into account all of these things. And I think that that's why we're so well positioned. It's not that we're following a trend. It's not a meme. It's an actual added value solution for the customer, because they come to us for a complete change in the way that they do things.
And more on that is really it's the solution that's the key. It's how we actually translate what these new emerging technologies are, and learning about them, being able to use them, because we use them in our day-to-day workflow. So we see where they go wrong, we also see where they go right. And an important thing here is that businesses, they're going to start to transform in terms of who is internal to that business. So you'll see AI or even just emerging tech translators. But we'll talk more about that in another show. So for now, Arturo, thank you.
Thank you.